Jagmeet Singh has pulled the deal, keeping the Liberals in power, which means when the House returns in just over a week, the next federal election could be triggered at any time on a confidence vote.
I've ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau, and I know that means that an election is now more likely as a result. We are ready to fight an election whenever it happens.
He is going to have to vote on whether he keeps Justin Trudeau's costly government in power or whether he triggers a carbon tax election.
An election will come in the coming year, hopefully not till next fall.
So all of this leaves a lot of uncertainty, especially for the Liberals, a party that took another big hit today, because on top of losing the NDP support, the Liberal Party also lost the man set to manage their next campaign. Jeremy Broadhurst announced today he's calling it quits as the party's national campaign director. So how long can the Liberals avoid an election? For more insight, I'm joined by David McLaughlin, former Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. Brian Topp is the former Chief of Staff to NDP Alberta Premier Rachel Notley. And Michelle Cadario, former Deputy Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Paul Martin. So welcome to you all. Michelle, you have some experience in Liberal minority governments. How do they deal with what's happened in the last 24 hours? You've lost your governing partner and your national campaign director, and it's a perfect time for caucus to get together in Nanaimo next week.
Well, the one thing I will say is I've also been campaign director, so I've had Jeremy Broadhurst's job. And I understand what goes into it. And, you know, if you read his statement, this is like we're a year out. And so it's kind of the last point where you can actually, it's go or no go at this point, right? And I think that he has been through this before. He understands the 24-hour-a-day kind of situation that the job demands. And on top of that, they're now in much more of a place where we were in 2003, where any vote could potentially bring the House down. And so the level of stress amplifies. The level of readiness, you know, while I still don't think there's going to be an election until the fall, the level of readiness is a much higher demand. And so, you know, I don't think that this was necessarily done in tandem or because of Mr. Singh's announcement. The timing is a little curious, I give that, but I don't think it would have come to any surprise to the center there.
No, there have been rumblings about this for a while. I think you're right on that. And Mr. Broadhurst spells out that he's worried about his health, his family, and 10 years, and he was there before Trudeau too, right? So that does carry a toll. But Brian, as Michelle correctly points out, the fall is going to be a lot more difficult for the Liberals based on what your crowd has now done. What do you make of this move, and how do you think Jagmeet Singh and his caucus are going to approach confidence votes and bills as things move through the fall?
Well, look, what I make of it is, first of all, the Liberal government and the Democrats didn't do anything wrong by coming up with this accord. It's what most Canadians want parties to do in minority parliaments, which is to work together to get things done. And they got some good things done. And they also haven't done anything wrong by getting out of it, because the election is closer than before, for sure. And it's time for them to start framing their offer to Canadians. And the accord, which was a great mechanism to get things done in Parliament, is now a political distraction. There's no doubt about it. And so, you know, I think what they're going to do now is we're going to be into a much more political period in the House, for sure. That is going to feel a bit more like, you know, the final months of previous minority governments. It's going to be very exciting. And what we're going to see is what we saw today in these clips we've been watching in your show, which is that the parties are positioning for the election. And at a certain point, it's going to be obvious that there has to be one, and then there will be one.
So Brian, why not just make that your reason, that it's time for us to go our separate ways with an election a year out, and we need to go our own path so we can offer a clear choice to Canadians, rather than saying they failed to act on corporate greed and they're too selfish and too weak and all of these things. Why not just lay it out as clearly as you just did?
Well, I'm not the comms department for Her Majesty's Fourth Party, and I can't tell you why they wrote it. I can just tell you what I think.
Right. That's fair. Fair ball.
Is that now is about the time for you to focus on framing the coming election. And, you know, to their credit, they didn't spend every working day, every moment of this Parliament campaigning, unlike the official opposition. They tried to get some work done. Mm-hmm. And they'll continue to try to get some work done if it's there. But, you know, look, we're at best a year away from an election. Frankly, I'd be surprised if it goes to the fall. We'll see. And so now it's time to start talking to the public.
Yeah.
And they're being pretty in your face, if I may say so. What they're saying is that the Liberal government is done, that they're not going to be players in the next election. And so if you don't want a Tory government, vote for them. And that is especially in Eastern Canada, a smart thing for them to do, because the traditional Liberal campaign in Eastern Canada is to say, if you want to stop the Tories, you have to go for the red door. And they are trying to preempt a red door strategy from the government.
So David, how do you see this? I mean, we've already seen, it was interesting, a week ago, Pierre Poilievre said, Jagmeet Singh needs to tear up the deal. Now that he's torn up the deal, he goes, this is a stunt. Yeah. What you need to do is vote no confidence and force this carbon tax election. So this is, you see this is their play. They've got the money, they've got the lead, they want to vote.
Sure.
How do you see things playing out from the Conservative side of things going ahead?
Well, the Conservatives are making all the running here. I mean, to the extent that there's any one political leader, I think, who is actually driving the political dynamics in the country and the conversations, and that it's more Poilievre than it is anybody else. And I think it was unfortunate timing for Mr. Singh and the NDP to make this announcement that he was talking about, that he had decided maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
It's a little perplexing. So it looks like he's very reactive to it. But at the end of the day, he had to sever the umbilical cord. I mean, this thing could become a political albatross, both for him and for his party. The NDP, over the course of this agreement, yes, they got some things done. I think that's not unimportant, as Brian pointed out. But they had lost their identity. They're becoming, kind of aligned with the government, and so their own political identity was becoming fused with that, and they're becoming less relevant, politically irrelevant to the conversation of the future, and that the more that they got tied in with this. So there is a need to sever that at a certain point. It was unlikely to proceed the whole distance anyways, so I think they had to choose the moment. And frankly, you might as well do it now before the new session comes back, where you're going to have this thrown in your face all the time, and that's strategic. But there's a little tactical advantage, a couple of by-elections going on. To the extent that this gives them a little bit of wind in their sails, might as well do it now, see if it particularly helps them in that Manitoba seat.
So Michelle, what are the consequences here for the Liberals beyond the ability to function as a de facto majority, which they've kind of had since March of 2022? They know their budgets are going to pass. They know confidence motions were going to survive. We're kind of back to a little bit of the drama here. Probably have to be in the House, more attendance, more of a leash, inability to be away from Ottawa. How do they approach the mechanics of just extending their mandate as long as possible? And their hope is that circumstances change.
Well, I think that the reality is, even though the deal is over, and I think that was inevitable, I agree with what David says, that the NDP are in no position to want to force an election campaign. They came in at less than 10% in that St. Paul's by-election. Let's see how they do in these upcoming by-elections. But this is not the Jack Layton party that was kind of raring to go and to bring us down in 2004. This is a very different circumstance. And so, they'll certainly on the confidence votes, the Liberals are going to have to be very conscious of making sure that their numbers are there, that the whip becomes that much more important. And they're going to have to manage the House and manage caucus more closely. But really, unless it's an unforced error and an unforced mistake, I actually don't see them going to the polls anytime soon. As long as the fortunes of the NDP are, as bad as the Liberals are right now, then why, you're trying to wait to turn some stuff around, to differentiate yourself. And quite frankly, for the Liberals, I think this is a good thing too, because it's much better to be able to tack off the left and tack off the right. And be that center party and that offering for Canadians.
Yeah, I saw Emma Grath saying today that the principal secretary to Jagmeet Singh that we're neck and neck with the Liberals in the polls, and the interviewer was like, well, that's still pretty low for both of you. But Brian, on the point of the possibility of a fall election, there are provincial elections in Saskatchewan and British Columbia. The NDP's in government, the NDP's in opposition, vying for government in Saskatchewan. That's going to take up resources, money, time, field workers, people. That greatly reduces the chances of a national election, does it not? So your thoughts on that and the stakes on the Elmwood-Transcona by-election in particular in Winnipeg?
If I could just say to begin,
Yep.
The NDP in no way lost its identity by being in this accord. New Democrats and CCFers and farmer labor MPs have been doing arrangements like this in the Parliament since the 1920s. In a circumstance in which they frequently had the balance of power, this has been what they do. And the consequence is that we have Medicare and we have pensions and we have the Canadian Labor Code and lots of other good stuff.
But in the case of
and
this,
then you get to run on it.
Well, no, sure,
So,
there's some history there, Brian. But in the case of this particular accord, because of the unpopularity of the Liberal government and the dynamics that have been happening, the two of them were becoming fused in terms of like everything that the Liberal government was doing that was unpopular was also getting laid, or elements of that were getting laid on the NDP's doorstep. And to that extent, that's what I mean by that identity piece of it and political fortunes. But you're right, historically, in fact, it's been the case. Yeah,
and David, you're a very wise man. I've always carefully read your stuff and tried to apply it in Manitoba.
Well, I didn't do too badly there a couple of times, and you did not so badly yourself.
Indeed. So look, to the question at hand, look, you're absolutely right. There's two really important provincial elections happening in Western Canada with an incumbent NDP government that's trying to be reelected and a really great Saskatchewan leader who's got a shot at being elected as Premier of Saskatchewan, which would bring a pleasing orange hue to the Western Canada, So I think if possible, I think the party would like to focus its resources on those elections. That is true. Right. And in consequence, the drama that we've been talking about, the risk of the government is a political opportunity for all the opposition parties to have agency in this parliament, and so that they all matter and what they think matters. And that's kind of what the New Democrats need now. They need to look like they matter again after going kind of quiet for a while toward the end of this accord. Now, to the by-elections.
Yeah, quickly.
Look, by-elections are by-elections, okay? They're important. If they could hold Transcona and if they could particularly pick up La Salle-des-Marcs, that would be awesome. And then they're done. I wouldn't overthink them, but sure, it would be great if they won.
Yeah, by-elections are by-elections, David, but then there was Toronto St. Paul's and kaboom, right? Yeah. So I just wonder, though, about Elmwood Transcona, because that's an NDP seat, but even New Democrats say to me, that's a Blakey seat, and they're a bit worried about it. And with the way Jagmeet Singh defined the choice facing Canadians between hope and prosperity and him, or cuts and despair and Poilievre, if they lose that seat to the Conservatives, it's a problem. It's a narrative changer.
No question, it's a problem. It's not something they want to see have happen to them. In fact, the literature, the doorstep literature, doesn't put Mr. Singh on the cover. It puts Mr. Canoe and Mr. Blakey.
And Trudeau's not on the ones in La Salle-des-Marcs either, right? There are issues.
Yeah. So this is, I think it would be a very big problem for Mr. Singh and the NDP if he didn't win it. I'm not trying to raise the stakes. It is still, it is also NDP territory provincially as well, as Brian and I both know. So, he should win this. And that the question, I think, will be very interesting how the Conservatives, with Mr. Poilievre's reaching out, very deliberate, to workers and sort of private sector union folks, and trying to say that you're part of our affordability family, conservative kind of, these are traditional values that work with you, to see whether or not that has any resonance and any momentum. That'll be more interesting as well. So there's a lot that's going on that could presage what might happen a year from now if we go that far.
Okay, Michelle, we're pretty much out of time. I just want to give the last word to you. I just wonder what you're watching for when Parliament returns, because things have been able to function reasonably well for the Liberals with the NDP there. Committees worked somewhat well. I feel that dynamic is all going to change. What are you watching for as they all come back to the office on the 16th of September?
Yeah, I think everything is going to be turned up by 9 degrees, and it's going to be feisty, and it's going to be mean and very nasty right through to the committee level. I think words like liar and those kinds of things, which generally aren't thrown around and are going to be much more frequent. And there's going to be a lot of people holding their breath on September 16th for those by-elections.
Okay, well,
which is why you need 3 nice nonpartisans like ourselves here to chat about it.
Agreeable disagreement in nonpartisan partisanship, it's an okay thing. It's okay to be that way. Thank you all for your time. Michelle Cadario, David McLaughlin, Brian Topp, thanks so much.